No, there's no reason for that. So we're on here streaming. I gotta edit a few other things really quick on the stream while we're in process, but because this is a new for me as well.
Yeah, I was looking at your past videos and stuff like that. Are you doing this like with parts of Stanny's or no?
Nope, not officially.
Oh, okay. That's something that, believe me, trying to get people in Stanny's to understand that we got to keep up with some of the stuff. Just doing the Twitter thing was hard enough getting people into it.
Yep. And then there are people that don't understand it, and they're like, "Oh, it's those other people,"
Yes. Yep. Totally.
Yeah. I'm just changing the title and everything for this.
Okay.
But we're on.
Cool. I think when I
change
this up a little bit here, just so I can see it.
Yeah. And it's always, I wonder, like, depending on what we're doing, the category I put it in, because I could put this in like just chatting, because that's essentially what it is, or podcast, because it's kind of like just chatting in a way, or science and technology. Oftentimes I'll put it in science and technology as well.
Oh, really?
So, especially like the last one, I was talking to an organic chemist, and it was very science specific, a lot of the conversation. So, whereas I think, this conversation, I'll probably put that as well in science and tech. It's the audience that I want.
Right.
Kind of, whereas next week, I'm going to be talking to someone about dropouts who go on to get PhDs. So it's kind of this idea of looking at how the other half, I'm used to working with kids, and thinking in terms of success in a certain way. And one of the things I've had to do in the last 10 years is redefine what I consider success, especially in terms of timelines, right? Mm-hmm. And I had this discussion with students as well, where we're talking about success, and they're like, well, I want to be successful. And I'm like, well, what does that mean? I'm like, I know some successful mothers. It's like, how do you want to define success? So anyways, we're going to have a little conversation. That's like more of a, not just science and technology, but kind of a broader social conversation with relations to direct education and teaching,
And it should be a one that teachers have all the time with others and in their school, in their community. It really is a huge issue.
Yep. So so that'll be fun. That'll be next week. So I'll be setting that up. So if you want to watch that and see how that goes. So
is it usually Wednesday nights at about this time?
Yep, that's what I've been doing. So it might change when the school year starts. I might do like an every other week thing. I don't know how much I can, I don't know yet. No one knows. How the time commitment works and everything. I don't know. This year's going to be so different than any other year. Like, we're going to block schedule, and I haven't done that since my student teaching like 20 years ago. So, and I know how it's different, but I also know I don't know how to actually plan for it. Well, I do, but timing is one of those things you develop over years teaching. Like, if you have a specific lab and this, you know how long it's going to take.
Yep.
Right. You're like, I know it should only take, 45 minutes, but my kids are going to drag their feet and it'll take 2 days. It'll take, full 2 periods. So I can look at that now and think, well, this is going to be a block schedule. I should be able to fit it within that, 90 minutes, but I don't know. I don't know how the kids are going to react to it.
Yeah, because when you have that much time, you're trying to figure out, well, I've got to have a break in here and put this in there. You got to rearrange things so that you and the students are not bored at any time or overwhelmed at any time. So
and there's like half the number of kids because they've split the number of kids coming in half. So instead of having, 26 eighth graders, I'll have 13, which makes a lesson run differently as well. So,
oh my God, yes.
I'm trying to plan this out, and it's like, I'm just kind of putting stuff down, and I'm like, well, I'm over planned, which is, from experience, is the better way to go about it than being under planned. So I'm just going for like stuffing stuff in there to be a little bit over planned. But, one of the things we learned in the spring was with that remote learning piece is you can't ask kids to do too much. What you can ask them to do is it's somehow different. And I know that as having done classes online myself, but also having tried teaching it online, it's, stuff happens in your house. When you're at home, as much as you can tell kids, separate yourself from your house, find a quiet place. Please, my dogs will bark and you will hear them throughout the house. It doesn't matter. And you know what I have to do? I have to deal with it. My kids are going to be no different. It's you're just one of those things you have to deal with as if you're home. So you kind of missed out on all this, didn't you, Gene?
Yeah. Not really. My wife is still teaching.
Okay. All right.
So
vicariously.
And believe it or not, I'm still really involved in education. I'm mentoring for NASA in schools, and I help a lot of people online and stuff like that. I don't foresee a day in my life that I don't try to teach. I do something. I got out of the classroom, which was the hardest choice I ever made in my life. And now I'm free to pursue education in the way I feel I want to pursue education. So,
yeah, well, that's great. Yeah, my wife's a teacher as well. I always find that teachers come in pairs. It happens all the time.
Yep.
So that is fantastic. Now, I did some of that NASA training stuff. I've done the Toys in Space one. I do that with my eighth graders. It's kind of, the retro videos are the best part.
Oh yes, absolutely.
It's awesome.
Now are they the best part for your kids also?
I'm like, don't ever change the videos. They're perfect. So and that's a lesson, that I do, and it takes, 2 days, because we go through, they have to make a prediction of if the toys will work or not. And then they go through and, they play with the toys, of course, and then we go through and we see what actually happens. Right. And that takes about, 2 periods to really get through the whole discussion of it and talking about, how gravity affects objects in motion. So you are familiar with that one. And that was a good, I did the online training through NASA for that. Now that was really good.
Oh, yeah, they did. What's interesting is over the past, I'd say, decade, NASA has really done a very good job of changing things up to make things better for teachers, and easier for teachers to understand what's available and things like that.
Right.
There's still so much stuff they have that it's kind of hard to get it all out and make teachers know what is available for them. But they definitely are trying, that's for sure.
Yeah. And I think a lot of people, make the mistake of thinking it's NASA, it's just, rocket science, kind of stuff, where it's so much more. You have the climate science, you have the geography, and oceanography, anything that a satellite basically can come up with. It, NASA has, something for that as well, as well as looking at, exoplanets and life on other planets. And there's just so much that NASA has their kind of feelers in beyond just, the stars and rockets.
Well, heck, that's one of the things that when last summer when I was down there, I was getting training for the mentorship that I'm doing with the NASA Hunch stuff. And I got to meet so many people that were, you would not most people would not guess that NASA has a large crew of. Like, for example, I got to meet the sewing crew at NASA.
Nice.
Like, people don't realize that the astronaut suits are sewn, and and there's so much, so many different things that NASA does, and kids and adults can do with NASA for that stuff. So that's one of the things that just every time I got a little bit more on NASA, I wanted more, and I just kept sharing with everybody. And that's probably the best part of my my career at the end of the last 15 years of sharing everything I learned from NASA there.
Yeah, I always joked. I've been down to the Rocket Coast myself a few times with my family, and because we love that area of Florida. Yeah. And I always joked with my wife when we're down there. I'm like, when I retire, I'm going to get like a maintenance job, just cleaning toilets, so I can have a NASA shirt, and say I worked for NASA. Doesn't matter that's when I'm 65. I don't care.
Well, that's the thing is, as a teacher, you can do that now. But the Space Coast thing, I was just down there I was at Cape Canaveral in June, and then I was in Johnson in Houston in July, and I got to see for the first time the SpaceX boosters come back and land, and it was at nighttime. What I thought a shuttle launch was amazing. Seeing rockets come back to land straight up and down, it was just incredible.
That's crazy.
And that was, I think, if I remember right, it was like 3 or 4 in the morning when they did it. I was dead tired, but I was wide awake when it happened.
Yep. And I've not seen a rocket launch or a landing. That's one of the things that we wanted to do. I missed it the last time I was down there, and I was like, oh, it was last week. Hey, God dang it. But I dragged the kids out of bed for that one. And I think there, like you said, there's, I think as far as careers go, and one of the things, we have to talk to our kids about is careers is, they don't realize, and I didn't even realize, of course, when I was growing up, the myriad of fields that are within not just NASA and SpaceX, but any research institution really, or company. Like there's, if it's a STEM company, they have people that have to do specific things, and they could be sewing and, up or down, it's from cleaning to making to, the electrical work to the actual research and development, it's all there, to finances, it's, you need all kinds of people. So, and you don't know if you're going to work for that. Just like, I tell my kids, I'm like, you could work for Regeneron and not be a scientist.
Yeah, absolutely.
You could work in their finance department or human resources or whatever. I mean, it's not like a science company is just science,
It's science adjacent. That's
exactly. Yep.
And it's one of those things that if you like science, you don't have to be a scientist. You can just go and do things that are connected to science. For my NASA Hunch group, I had kids that basically were figuring out, I like to write all the stuff for science. And other kids going, I like to be the one that talks about it and and get up in front and ask and answer questions for people. But I don't necessarily have the ability to create the object, and so there's learning that there are all these science adjacent fields and I'm going to say careers is probably the best way to put it, that people can do. It amazes students, but it also amazes adults. All the different things you can do. This past year, I just hosted a NASA culinary program. Where schools, all the local chefs, I had local chefs from, that are pretty famous around our area, and radio personalities and things come in and taste foods that students had prepared for NASA astronauts for the International Space Station. And all these chefs kept asking, like, what is this program? How do you, what are the kids doing here? What is the point? And they were just amazed. And then they taste the food and were like, I can't believe kids created this stuff. And they did.
Yep. That's really cool. That's another field where you're like, you don't even realize it. It's also it's funny. I was thinking a lot about careers, and I'm having my midlife crisis. Maybe, I don't know, but a good friend of mine just got the head esports coaching job at a local community college, and he was worried that I was going to apply first and get the job, and I'm like, no, I don't want that. And it's one of those weird things where suddenly you become an expert in something you didn't realize that you were. Mm-hmm. And I'm like, when did I become like some expert in esports? It's like I never, I guess I have some kind of, I've done it longer or just as long as anyone else, I guess, and I have experience. But it made me think of, there was a job at Twitch that required a degree in curriculum development, which I have, and experience like streaming and gaming. And I'm like, well, how many people have those credentials?
Yeah.
And I'm like, I don't want to live in California, so I'm not going to apply for it. But I'm like, it's one of those weird things. And, and you try to tell kids, you're like, especially for science, you're like, okay, you might not use it now, but aren't you just curious to know? And then, maybe see where it takes you. It's one of those like
the discovery of the things you can do is like, when I can't tell you the number of times people would go, can you do this for me? I'm like, I don't have any experience in that. And they go, but you can do X, Y, and Z, and so you could do this. I'm like, oh, I guess so. It's like, wow, and things you don't even consider as you're going forward. Yeah. And it just like your students need somebody to go, you can do this. At times, teachers do the same thing. Or actually, I don't care what field you're in. I know many people in different fields that could easily switch up if they wanted to.
Yeah. So Jason in chat just redeemed some points to do push-ups. Great. All right. Thanks, Jason. All right. I'll get down and do my push-ups.
You have to do push-ups?
1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10.
I don't know. They weren't one-handed.
They were the best push-ups ever, and I expect to see you in Kung Fu class, Jason. Man, I haven't seen you since like March. So, but thanks for stopping by, Jason. I haven't seen him in like ages, either online or in person. So,
seeing anybody in this day and age.
Oh yeah, but you have strep. Oh my God, that's terrible. You can't do anything because everyone thinks you have COVID.
Right.
That's awful. The thing is, you had to get it somehow. It's like one of those things. I don't, those weird things. I have not been sick in so long just because I have not been near anyone.
Well, that's the thing. The number of conversations I've had with non-educators about this is like, teachers know that the second week of September is the week that people start falling over just like little dominoes. Mm-hmm. When it just kind of spreads throughout the school. So it's one of those things that I don't envy schools about this year.
Yep. Or it's that second week of January. It comes through again, and that's why they always had that February break came just in time to break up the stomach bug. Yeah.
Yep. Oh yeah. And the thing about it is like with Jason having strep, everybody's going to think every ailment is COVID. It's like,
yep, you have to assume the worst.
Yeah, it's like, I know, I just injured my knee. It's not COVID. Don't worry.
Yep. Yeah, that's right. You hurt your knee. I was making your garage, right? Your 100-year-old garage. I worked on 2 garages this summer, and I have a 200-year-old house with a 100-year-old garage built onto it here, and then I have down in the country, I have an old barn
that basically just had posts and like aluminum on the outside, so I couldn't close both in and had to redo things. And somehow I did all these dangerous things and never hurt myself. And then the other day I just knelt down to screw something into a wall, and I felt something pop in my leg. And now I've been laid up for 4 or 5 days.
Isn't it weird how that happened? So like you could do all this stuff, you know.
It's what it's called, getting old.
Yeah,
that's what they tell me. But it's better than the alternative, I guess.
Yep. Yep.
Not getting old.
Not being able to get old. You know?
Yeah, exactly.
Yep. Definitely. So as I alluded to, so like I have an esports program now, which was an offshoot of my gaming club, which I had done for a while, which was originally like a Minecraft club, you know.
Oh, okay. Cool.
And I went through that, and I knew that you played D&D, so I was like, well, he must have a gaming club or had a gaming club when he was a teacher. I'm like, how do you not do that? So tell me about what your club was like.
Let's see here. I've had 32 years of teaching. I had a games club for about 30 years of that. And it was mostly board games. And then we kind of followed the trends. We during the early days of gaming for the millennial generation, we started being able to bring in our consoles and things, and so we started doing things like Dance Revolution.
Nice.
Yeah. And then you name the game, it was played up on the board and everything. But we all played collectible card games. We did D&D. Probably one of my favorite things we ever did in D&D. I mentioned it that I had a gaming group to my students one year, and they're like, "Not you?" And I thought, "Yeah, I've had a gaming group, and well, now it's 32 years. At that point, it was like 15." And they're like, "Would you run a game for us?" And I guess I could. I'm trying to figure out how to get all these people involved. And so I ended up getting them, convincing this group of kids, about 20 kids, to we did. Ever hear of Labyrinth of Madness?
No.
It was billed as the deadliest dungeon ever created for D&D. Okay. And so I said, okay, we'll do this. And we're going to do is we're going to tag team. As soon as somebody dies, we're going to have another person just pop right in.
Funny.
The record, I within the first 5 minutes, I'd killed 2 people. And they just kept doing it. The kids loved it. We ran it for almost, I would say 8 months, and just we're going through it, and just kept going like once or twice a week, and we play this after school, and it was just fun. And it was one of those things that the reason I play games with other people is for the social aspects, and the reason I play games at school is to help kids with those social aspects, because it was one of those things that the kids that get into gaming at first, not nowadays. Nowadays it's a lot different. But when I first started playing, those kids didn't have many social skills, and so it was a really big thing to get them to be social and be properly social.
Right. I think properly social is a big piece.
Yeah, and it worked. It worked well. We had all kinds. I had years that I only had 5 people in the club, and then there were years I had over 60. And that was kind of hard, having it splitting up and down the hall in several rooms. But it helped the kids, and I had so many parents contact me and thank me for providing that opportunity for their kids. And it was really nice. I even had a lot of the special ed kids and the severely handicapped kids come and join the group also. And it was always cool having them as part of it. And they got a lot out of it, a lot of social interaction. It was another teaching opportunity, and for skills that I think were more important than a lot of the ones we have in classrooms.
Well, I think, now it's like, now they have a label for it, of course, your social emotional learning.
Right.
We'd been doing this all along, and this, someone came along and put a label on what, we had been doing. And it's like, oh, you can do these strategies to teach these social emotional skills. They're like, oh, you're describing games, and gaming club. It's like, this is, nothing's changed really. Okay. It's like, it's the same thing. Cause I find the same thing with my club. It'll go ups and downs where there'll be 5 kids. There might be 30, which is huge for my school. Our class sizes only have like 80 kids in like, the 7th grade, 80 kids in the 8th grade kind of thing. So, and those kids, especially that don't do sports, or other more traditional, after school activities like, student government or, things like that. And it definitely gives them that place to go. We also now call those affinity groups, where they can find their affinity group. It was my first or second year teaching. I don't know why they thought I would do it. Kids came up to me and they're like, "Can we come after school and play Magic the Gathering?" I'm like,
"Yep,
yeah. Should I bring my cards?" And that was and I had that, and that's when it started. It like, from there, it's like. I was like, well, at that point, I had to look at the contract and be like, well, can I actually get paid to do this? Blah, blah, blah. And then, I found the money and it kept evolving from there. And like now it was kind of like what you're describing, where I had this big room the last few years where you would have consoles of 3 kinds of consoles.
Yep.
Kids on their Chromebooks, kids playing Uno in one table, another group of kids playing something else on another table. And it was just like, it looked like chaos, but the kids were just having a blast, and I just had to make sure they picked up after themselves when they left. That was the other piece of learning, picking up.
And with one of the cool things I found out, especially now the last decade or so, with the rise of cooperative games and stuff like that, like D&D is cooperative and things like that. But there are all these other games, Forbidden Desert, and things like that are cooperative, that I started using actually in the class at the beginning of the school year to get students to know each other and to work together, like for a lab group and stuff like that. And by doing that, my one NASA class, I had every Friday for the first 2 months. Was a game day in which we would play different things, and you had to rotate to different groups. And then then they had to tell me the next week. I would all of a sudden start quizzing them. So what's this person's name? Does this person have a sister or a brother? And start seeing what they learned. And they started realizing that this was important, not just for the game, but for their interactions as a group. And it really worked well for that. And the students looked forward to it, and so much so that later on, when we stopped doing it, when things got really intense with other stuff, they would ask me, if we really get all our work done, can we have a game day this week? This week, yeah. And so it was something they would look forward to, just to relax and to just and think in a different way.
And little did they know that you had tricked them into learning other skills as well.
Well, that reminds me of the thing that bothers me the most. The worst thing anybody could ever say to me as a teacher, another teacher turning to me and trying to compliment me and saying, "You're making learning fun. You make it look like it's so much fun in your class." And that bothered the heck out of me. And it was like, learning is fun.
Yeah, I'm just
ask any 5-year-old out there. It's
I can't.
Learning.
Are you trying to insult me or insult yourself? I'm not sure.
Learning is fun when you do it the right way. If you show people how much enjoyment you get out of it and everything. My kids constantly were like, "You really enjoy this stuff," and I'm like, "Yeah, I wouldn't be doing it if I didn't enjoy it."
Yep. Oh yeah, and I tell my kids, I'm like, why would I not enjoy playing games with you. I'm like, and having fun. I'm like, what am I not supposed to like about this job? Right now, I'm like, if I'm not having fun and like doing something I enjoy, then I'm doing something wrong, because guess what? I came up with the plan. That's my own fault.
That's right. If you're not enjoying your class,
yep,
you're doing something wrong. And I know that bothers some people. It's not always me. No, it's not always you. But if it's always this way for you, then it must be you.
Yep. And that's where I think a good amount of teacher reflection comes in handy. That, obviously you've done a lot of, I do a lot myself. And I think there's a fine line between constructive reflection and just being hard on yourself.
Right.
Because I think we have a problem as teachers of being really hard on ourselves when something doesn't go the way, like you thought something was going to be fun, and it turned out that it just fell flat, and you're like, all right, I'm not a bad teacher because of that. I just, had a bad day,
Right. And we all have. Wrong? We all have.
Oh yeah, that's part of learning and getting by as a teacher. And I think that's one of those things after like maybe the 5-year mark, you kind of really figure that out, because you start looking more at yourself and your colleagues and the kids, and you're kind of like, all right, I've been doing this 5 years. What am I doing right?
Right.
What am I doing wrong? What could I do better? And then the next 5 years are part of that progress. And then you look at your colleagues, you're like, why are they so stressed out? Why are kids acting like that in their class and not mine? Or, you start noticing things.
That's one of the things that probably the best advice to give the young teachers is, and to all teachers, is one day a week or one day every 2 weeks. I know things get stressed. Observe another class, and especially not just in your field. Some of the best stuff I learned in other classes came from other subject matter, like not even science. And so I can't tell you the number of things I've learned from going to see social studies teachers and English teachers when they're in the core of doing things.
I find foreign language teachers are really good as far as like the activities that they do with kids and the vocabulary. I mean, science is a foreign language in a way.
Right.
And so, a lot of those same skills that you see the foreign language teachers doing, really work well for science. And I would think vice versa as well. Something that I would do in science would also translate into a foreign language curriculum. If you think of I always think simulations and role playing are a big one, right?
Yeah.
We do that in science all the time. We're like, all right, everyone, we're going to be atoms, okay? Stand up and, pretend like you're a solid, that kind of thing. Whereas in foreign language, they'll be like, okay, you're at the market. Let's go shopping and buy something, right? And then they have a whole simulation. So, I think that piece is something that goes well between both.
Oh, I totally agree with you on that. And that is something, in addition to that, is why not do something jointly with a teacher of a different subject, and see where that leads. For example, in my astronomy class, one of the things that I did for many, many years was I held a trial for Galileo. The students had to take sides and retry Galileo in the modern age, taking people out of time, and I got that idea from a social studies teacher, and dealing with, okay, how do we do this? How do we teach the kids about how to, for example, how to present evidence, how to be in a legal way, not necessarily a scientific way, and things like that. It was watching kids get over that. It was that hump of how do you convince others that the earth goes around the sun? And what was really fun was, over the years, more times than not, they proved Galileo was a heretic. Because it's hard.
Yeah.
It's hard to produce evidence for your regular peers. Just think of this day and age with the arguments people are having over science. They go hand in hand.
You have to make an argument that's understood,
Exactly.
And it has to be understood to be believed. And so, if you're like presenting these equations and you're like, look, it says here, or if we make these observations, and they're just like, what? Nah.
No, exactly.
You're crazy. I see the sun come up. I see it come down.
I tell you, for the last over the years, it was a big joke that in the 90s, one of my students found it on the web. In the 90s, the web really wasn't around that much in schools. But one of the kids had access and said they found a site for the Flat Earth Society. And so I went to it and everything. And so every year I would, when the kids would go down to the library at this point, I'd get them to the library. They can use the computers out of the library in the beginning. And eventually we had them in the classroom. I'd point out the Flat Earth Society about the day 2 of them gathering evidence. And it was always a joke. How could anybody believe this? I'm telling you, by the end of my career, I had kids coming into my class that their parents were members of the Flat Earth Society. And that is not a joke. That is part of the reason we're in the state we're in today, is because these parents were having were arguing with me. Eventually I got in an argument with parents over this stuff. One parent was totally convinced that the moon landings were faked. So it's how do you teach their kids?
Oh yeah.
It's a scary idea, but that was I saw it without realizing the rise of that whole culture.
Yep. Well, one of the things, I have a general science class, which is basically the students that are not going to take Regents Chem to graduate. All right. So I have the remedial science class. Even though I've seen the class list, and some of those kids are definitely smart enough to pass Regents Chem. They're just not motivated worth beans, which is unfortunate because they're going to try to game me the entire year and be a pain in my butt the entire year. These are the kids that can ace every test you give them, but do absolutely nothing else. But anyways, part of my plan is to look at, daily or bi-daily, because I only see them, every other day, COVID news. Because I have a site where I can access a daily map of rates and infection rates and the news for the day, and just kind of look at it with them, and if they have something they saw, talk about it, because there's just so much information out there that I have trouble, keeping up with it and figuring out what's going on sometimes, because something will come out so fast and it'll just blow up on the internet, and there's just so much stuff to parse through that even, I grew up with the internet and doing searches and science and research stuff, and I have trouble like figuring out, all right, what is actually legit? I can't imagine a parent or a kid that doesn't have a background in science being able to look at something and decide whether that is good data or bad data, or if someone's trying to feed you BS or not.
Yeah, just the terms, like the scientific terms. I watched Dr. Fauci from the beginning. I actually read some of this stuff earlier, over 10 years ago, that he had written. But it was amazing he was still around. But when this whole thing started going on, I watched him change his wording. At first, he was very, very overly scientific, and therefore, to be blunt, boring, and you would tune out. And he started changing that when he realized what was happening to him, and what was,
right,
what was going on in the government and everything. And he started becoming more personable and started to change his words to not be 14 letters long each, and just the average person try to explain what a positivity rate is.
Yeah.
And it's hard. And I was doing, it was one of the things I've been trying my best the past 6 months or so to present on the social media pages all the stuff that I find that is a decent read for teachers and students, and especially graphs. I don't know if you ever saw the hashtag I started making. Graphs mean something, which was always something I said to my students. But holy cow, the past 6 months, the graphs have just been awful.
Oh yeah, they're terrible.
And trying to explain to people what's wrong with them or what's good with them is actually, as you said, bring them into your general science class. Ask the kids, what does this graph say to you? What are you getting out of this? And that's the best way to approach it with the kids, is have them argue a little bit about it.
Yep. And a lot of it is the new standards are a lot about modeling, and graphs are just a model of the data. And, one of the problems that we have with graphs is if you make them too easy to read, they're just so general that they're kind of meaningless.
Exactly.
Or you add too much information and you have no idea what you're looking at.
Let's have 50 countries on this graph.
Right. And you're just like, you're like trying to read the tiny letters. You're like, what country is that? What, I mean, even if you put all 50 states, it can be a little, much, and so right. I actually feel, there's somebody out there that's trying to decide what graphs to make. Mm-hmm. Usually when you publish an article, there's specific criteria that you must include to, get published. Right. But I don't think like newspapers have any such idea when it comes to like science graphs of what looks good and what doesn't.
Is it pretty?
Is it pretty? Are there colors? Not is the data good? Right. Because you could put a graph out there but miss something entirely. That would conflate what you're viewing on the graph.
And even worse than that, I can't tell you the number of graphs I've seen. The most blatant of which was there was a graphic that they put out by the state of Florida at one point, which showed the rate of infection going down when it was actually going up. And all they had done was a bar graph, and they'd switched the dates around. So they were in this random order. It's like, seriously? And so, but it looked like the graph is going down. See, the graph is going down, so therefore the numbers are going down. Wait a minute.
Well, that's something that you would get a kid to turn in, and that would be their conclusion. The rates are going down. You're just like, no, go back and look at it again.
Yeah.
All right. We have continuous data here. Okay, do it. Do it in numerical order.
That's one of those. But that's one of those things that giving the kids the graphs or whatever the data, and asking them what do they see. That's the number one way of doing science of any kind. I think is you got to let the kids get their hands on the stuff to start out, and that's always been my big thing. Is I've always been an inquiry type person where I just was like, what do you think? And that's and let's go from there. Let's build from what you're thinking about this data. Even in physics, I did it.
Yep.
I started off Newton's laws, and everybody was able to say by the time they got to high school, they were all able to say the laws. Okay, so what do the laws mean to you? Let's go through this, and it just was that kind of stuff was just wonderful watching them come to the realization at times that what they realized about these laws was wrong. And almost everybody entering high school has the wrong impressions on Newton's laws. But if you let them approach it from, instead of preaching to them what they are and giving them the definitions and things, all of a sudden they take ownership of what they understand and what they don't understand.
Mm-hmm. Yep. I put in the Twitch chat this game, since you're a game person. It's called Charty Party.
Oh, okay, cool.
And basically it's kind of like, it's basically you can choose your axes and make up silly graphs. And so I actually did the Kickstarter for this. So I should have a copy of this coming. Unfortunately, since we can't, play cards with kids right now, but I can still, we can like draw some random cards and stuff and do this. So, I think it's a fun way to kind of talk about, graphs and get kids to kind of think about, graphing, because it is hard for kids.
It's hard for a lot of people. USA Today, it was famous for putting a graph every day on its front page. Mm-hmm. And I would say easily 2 out of 5 days a week, the graph was meaningless. And they realized it, and they finally stopped doing it because their own people did not get the graphs they were trying to present.
Oh yeah. And along the same lines, as far as like information, I read the research paper was published that like the Lexile level for most COVID articles that are released are like at the college level.
Absolutely.
Or above. Yep. And they're like, all the people that are trying to read this, most of them can't. Mm-hmm. They just can't do it. It's let alone a high school kid, try to read it. So, they're advocating for better science communication, basically. That's why we need those science people.
Well,
Rob says, so much for no data is bad data. Yeah, you can have, yeah.
I have a D&D game, on virtual D&D game every week. And the DM is an immunologist type in North Carolina. And it's really funny. It's every week, all these other people and I were like, okay, we read this. What does this mean? And I can't tell you the number of times we say, okay, well, we know that you were just talking there for the last 5 minutes, but we didn't understand a word you just said. Can you put that in people speak?
Yeah, I remember Stephen Jay Gould, who I read a lot of his essays, had a really good one about science communication and how most scientists just can't write unless they're writing for other scientists within their own field. Otherwise they're completely useless, because they really don't know how to communicate well outside of their own, niche of experts. And I think that's why certain people can bridge out, like Neil deGrasse Tyson and, I think, Carl Sagan and others that really manage to be good science communicators and talk, out to the rest of us, because, we have to, as teachers, parse down that as well, into those bite-sized chunks that kids can kind of get, at all the different levels that kids are at. And that's why it's so challenging, because you have to try to reach the kid with dyslexia as well as the kid that's, at the 12th grade reading level in 8th grade. It's all kinds.
And it doesn't help that what we do when it comes to that is not looked on positively. And what I mean by that is I'll never forget that being observed by it was this student teacher's last observation. He'd already gone through all the things. He'd gone a very smart individual, came up to me after observing a class and turned to me and, again, in all positive manner, said, "That's amazing. I can't believe how much you can dumb down the physics for your students."
He didn't say it quite right.
And I just looked at him, but that's exactly. And I see what you're saying, that's exactly what people mean. They think that we're dumbing it down, and it's not dumbing it down. Nope. I have two relatives that are actual physicists and PhD level. One is works for the military as a chief scientist in the military, and his joke was, "Oh, I just became a mere teacher of physics," and he means it well, but it means that, oh, it's not a real profession to talk about and teach others how to understand your field. I was going to be a physicist, and I decided after I got a week before I got my degree in physics that I was going to be a teacher. And I said, no, I want to, the most enjoyment I get out of this is talking about my field. I love talking about science. And now, not only do I want to talk about science and physics, I want to talk about education all the time. It's a passion.
Hence why you're here and talking with me, because I have the same interests. And and I think as far as like educators on Twitch, there's a lot of them out there that are doing educational stuff, especially a lot of the space stuff. I'm sure you're familiar with, that there's a lot of telescope parties and things like that, on Twitch. I mean, it's really good communities, and that education piece is huge, and having a presence, on Twitch as well as, social media, because, sometimes it's international. Sometimes kids just don't have access where they're at to good educators or good content or inspiring people. I mean, I watch, people on Twitch, and it's like, wow, these are, good teachers. I'm learning a lot just, watching here and hanging out. And then you can get onto the Discords of some of these people in these groups, and there's a real outlet for people globally. And this is what, as educators, we want. We want people to have access. It shouldn't be, especially with the internet, a limitation of where you live to be able to access something you're passionate about, in a science education. It should be available. Unfortunately, some of the best parts you just can't get on a person-person interaction over a screen. You have to get your hands dirty.
Oh, well, the thing about it is, and I got it, and I totally agree with you. But it's one of those things like, you've been to professional developments in your career. I don't know, 15, 20 years teaching for you?
15 or almost 20. It's between 15 and 20. You're right. I'm on 18. Okay. So it's right in the middle there. Yep.
Okay. In 15 to 20 years, and I'm going to put you on the spot here. Can you tell me how many of those professional developments you went to were outstanding?
Yes. I mean, there's different parts of certain ones that were outstanding too.
No. The full professional development.
The full thing. I can name a few, like all the Games and Ed ones that we have locally. All of those I've been to were fantastic because it was free, and they brought in people from North America and even internationally to come in and talk about games and education. The Summer Spark, I went to Milwaukee for like 2 years. That was like a huge, really inspiring. They had great keynotes, like huge keynotes. Like it was basically one of these massive conferences, and they took all the good stuff and put it into a small one that you could afford to go to.
That's
and so I those are both really small and intimate, which is what I like, I think, in a conference versus, I love the Stannis conferences are good, but they're big, but they're good. That's another kind of conference though. It's different. Yes. I find that personally, I like those smaller, more intimate ones.
And by the way, when I say professional development, I mean like a session at Stannis. I'm not talking about.
Okay, I'm talking about overall, like those. Oh yeah. Like there was nothing like I didn't go to sessions that were bad, essentially, or keynotes where I'm like, okay, whatever, No, but even at Stannis, there were, the ones I gave, of course, were fantastic. those sessions. I mean,
well, and the point I'm trying to get at with that was that professional development for educators is, for most people, will laugh if you're going to have PD. If all of a sudden your district says, "Oh, we're going to have professional development day," almost all teachers go, right? Yeah, and things like go on like that. It's almost a joke in the education community. Yet, when I first started on social media, the thing I got out of it the most was professional development. Twitter, especially.
Oh yeah, Twitter's great.
When I first started out on Twitter, I got, it took me about a year, but after that first year, I started meeting up with some people that were just amazing to just bounce ideas off. Eventually, I was like, people were like, "Oh, what do you do in a lab?" And I started running full labs for teachers over Twitter back when it was only 140 characters. And, so you can do these things. It's not the same. And in this day and age where we're all going virtual, it won't be the same and it won't be perfect. But I still think that if you arrange it right, you can get the kids excited, interested in doing things. It's just not going to be, if you think it's going to be the same old thing, just put on a screen, you're dead wrong.
Oh yeah. And one of the things that I had to figure out last, because I'm an inquiry person as well, in the spring, I wanted kids doing stuff at their home, as far as science. And I'm like, well, I can't really expect them to have stuff because some of these kids pretty much have nothing, you know? And if I do have them do something, it can't be a grade, because I can't have that kid that has nothing getting a grade for not doing anything, And so, totally agree. And so like I had one where we did weather instruments, and if the kids couldn't make a weather instrument for whatever reason, they could go out and make cloud observations. Right. And so you kind of have to think outside the box like that. Yes. I also did the one where they had the cup and they had the cardboard in the water in it, and they had to do the air pressure. I figured the majority of kids can find a cup and a piece of like paper or cardboard, and most of the kids did that. I had them like post videos. It was funny, but it wasn't a grade. It was more of just, hey, let's do an experiment, see if you can do it. And so this year there's going to be a lot of that. It's just hard. It's hard to plan for that.
Absolutely.
You could, go to the dollar store, buy a bunch of stuff, and then take it all to kids' houses, and, and do it that way. That's tough. And that's where, you don't want kids that have less to miss out. And that's why, we have a belief in public education and its value, because we're also those kids going to be able to go in and have access to beakers and graduated cylinders and other scientific equipment, and actually, learn to use them and make observations with guidance and things like that. So it's unfortunate, but I believe what you say as well, that there's value in that. There is so much you can get from this kind of interaction over a screen. You can get inspired. I mean, who hasn't seen certain TED Talks and gone away and be like, "Oh my God, that was great!" That's a good video, all right. I think the same thing can happen, for kids. If you're willing to make it more than just, a bland interface.
Yes. And you got to the interactions. This is where the virtual thing could end up, depending on the student and how you do this, could end up being more personable and more personal than the in face thing. Because when you're talking to students, for example, a student that's an introvert, okay, and you're trying to talk to them in class and everything in person, there is a nervousness about that interaction for that student that is not necessarily there when you're doing it versus like this. And so there are opportunities here that, if you look at it differently, I think that people can make this, not only make this work, but in some ways make it work better because, and I'll get off my high horse on this one. My wife and I have this conversation all the time.
Preach.
Right now, and that is, education has been going to this route where we're at today with the virtual stuff and everything for a while. It's been heading there. A lot of people are pushing for it. We saw how bad it can be. The last 6 months in education was like, okay, you have 24 hours to change everything up, go. And teachers rose to the occasion. And in most cases, they were just amazing with what they came up with and what they were able to do when thrown in boiling water. They were able to survive, and the kids tried, but they're young. They don't understand this as much as we do. And it's like, and so now we're hardened, and we got to be able to be willing to do this again, because I don't think things are ever going to go completely back to the way they were. We were heading in this direction anyways. Like, you're doing esports and everything. It's one of those things that this is the world we live in now. There's a major online thing. Like, it sounds totally off tangent here, but it's not. Who would have ever thought that watching people play games would be a thing? Not only a thing, create its own channel. That's what Twitch is. Yeah. People watching people play games. If you would have said that 10 years ago, people would have laughed at you.
I know. I tell people, I'm like, well, there's the NFL channel.
Right.
Right? I like there's the MLB channel. I mean, it just what kind of game you want to watch.
And so we got to go this route in some way for education too. Not all the way. Nothing will ever replace in-person teaching. Nothing.
Absolutely. Because you have to be a mentor and a dad and advisor and confidant and all that, and that's hard to do online.
You can't.
And I will say that one of the things that's missing is going to the space that the youth is at. I mean, I have a Discord for my club, and I had so many kids start chatting about school on that Discord. I had to make some channels for school help, basically. That's where they felt comfortable talking, because that's their space. I was doing Fortnite Fridays while we were out, right? Until we would just go online and play Fortnite every Friday. And I saw more kids with me playing Fortnite than I did in class. Because you're going into their space, right? That's where they are comfortable being. They're not comfortable in a Zoom call, right?
Right.
If you give them like an avatar, or and don't call it something edu, that has to be their space. I mean, if you had Fortnite edu, you would have killed it. So there's a fine line of I don't know how it'll look, but there's got to be some way to kind of have class in World of Warcraft, kind of thing, where it's their space, but we have this ability to kind of be there at the same time where they're comfortable. But not all kids are that way, right? Not all kids are gamers. Yeah, that's one of the things you realize right now as well. Not every kid's going to want to, become a dwarf and then, go on a raid with you, or join Fortnite and try to get some headshots. But we have to have, I think part of it is having choice, just like you do in class. Maybe there should be more choice as far as how kids approach the material. Kind of like, hey, I'll have a session in this platform, but we'll get together, but I'll also just do a face-to-face call as well.
Yeah, and it's got to work both ways that way too. They have to be willing to come, they come to you part way too. So, by the way, I was reading the comment by.
Yep.
And I totally agree. I remember back in the 70s, standing and watching the crowd, the gathering around people playing Space Invaders. And then during the 80s, for me, it was the person, was it Dragon's Lair?
Yep, Dragon's Lair was awesome.
It was the first Laserdisc video game. And people would sit around and watch that, but not for hours and things like that. That's developed over the years. I mean, to be honest, you're talking to somebody who has devoted not just hours, thousands of hours watching people play D&D. I am a critter. I don't know if you know. Do you know Critical Role?
Mm-hmm.
Do you know Critical Role now?
I know what it is when you roll it. When you get a critical hit.
No. There's a D&D group called Critical Role.
Oh, okay.
Who is now getting the biggest Kickstarter for television ever. And they started out, was it 5 years ago now? And I watch them for 5 hours a week, every week.
Wow.
For 5 years. In fact, I've invested so much. I understand the people doing this and how the culture has changed. But I've invested so much that behind me, I don't know if you can see this behind me.
I can see it.
I built that. Okay.
Nice.
That is a fully playable model of a house from the show. I mean, totally everything in here. Yes.
Wow. That's devotion right there.
The thing about it is, if you look up the show and everything like that, there are people that they watch it for the community, and it's just like it's something that we as educators could easily adopt into our own type of thing if we can create a comfort space for students that they would just voluntarily spend their time. I mean,
I think that's part of the lot of talk about culture within your classroom, and I think that's something that good teachers have always done. They've always been able to establish some kind of camaraderie and culture within their room. I know it's something I've always tried to do. I don't know if I've always done it successfully. Where they have that comfort, where they know they can come in and it's going to be a place where they're going to have some fun and they're kind of learn something and they'll be safe and then they'll go about their day.
Right.
It's not their entire life. I mean, some teachers I think that their class should be your entire life. I'm like, no, okay, I know that's not true. But I think a good amount of that culture and that community building, and I think it's something that I've seen a lot of that since I've started streaming and I've gotten into Discords and Twitch and things where there's a lot of that community building, where I didn't really think I thought I kind of understood it, but now I'm really starting to see that and think about like what you said about how could you get that culture into your classroom, and that's a great question. Now I'm thinking
it's a hard question, because I'll tell you right now, I had students that did not like my class.
Mm-hmm.
I had kids that loved my class at the same time. You can't please every single student. You can't please every single person.
Yep.
But creating a welcoming, I want to use the word loving, but it may be the incorrect word. The kids know that this is a good place, as much a home for them as their own home, or better in some cases. That's what you want. That's what you want to provide. You don't want them to fear or hate going to your classroom for any reason. And that's where it starts, I think. And dare I say fun, but the idea, they know that they are going to get something out of the class because they're excited to learn. That's where I would use the word fun. And like, if you're excited to learn, you're going to have fun no matter what. No matter where you go, no matter what you do. So trying to get those students that way. For many years, and I taught physics for my entire career, but I specialized in the non-traditional physics student. And so I purposely taught physics to students that did not want to know physics. First question I'd ask every year in my physics class and my astronomy class, first question was, who is in this classroom because they 100% want to be in this classroom. In astronomy, I'd have almost everybody but one student raise their hand.
Right.
Of course. Oh, I want to learn more about space. I want to learn more about black holes. I want to learn about this. And in my physics class, it would be the exact opposite. I'd have one kid kind of look around and do this, and everyone else. I go, "You're here because your parents told you have to be. You're here because you were told you need it for college. You're here."
Yeah.
And so I purposely specialized with students that did not fit those to fit into those classes that they were excited to be there. And my goal was by the end of the year, those students wanted to be in the classroom. Didn't matter. They just wanted to be there. And that was, I didn't care about the physics at all. It came through, but I didn't care. I wanted them happy that they were learning something.
Yeah. And that's the thing. It's when you have a class like I'm going to have for my general science class, I kind of like that challenge. I'm used to it. Where the kids they will literally challenge you, like,
oh yeah,
they will say flat out, I don't want to be here, make me, I'm not going to learn this, you can't make me. Okay, I'm glad I know where you stand on this. Versus like, it's a similar thing to, there are kids in your class that will get A's regardless of what you do. Or despite you, despite everything, you could be the worst teacher in the world. That teacher will still get A's. Mm-hmm. It's the kids that don't that you want to be able to bring up to that level, and that's where I place my success. I'm like, okay, that the A student got an A in my class. Okay, whoop-de-doo. Okay, I mean there'd be a problem if they didn't. Yeah. Hey,
then
that kid that's failing every other class passed mine. Ah, all right. A little bit of success.
You just reminded me of one of my favorite stories, and I can't believe I totally forgot about this. When at one point I was switching between I was in two schools for the majority of my career. There was one year that I was in a different school. I had switched schools. And I got to this other school, and they gave me an earth science class. I'm an earth science teacher, also being an astronomy buff. Mm-hmm. And they gave me an earth science class, and I said, okay. And then one of the other teachers were asking me the week before school started, oh, can I take a look at your class and your class list? And I said, sure. I hadn't even looked at them. They're like, oh, what was that? What's that mean? You got that class. And I go, what class? You got the kids that have taken earth science 3 years in a row and failed every year. And so they need to pass your class. They're all seniors. Oh, okay. And that's what I said. And I walked into that class. Didn't think about it that much. And I, knowing these kids have been through the exact same course for 3 years. and I turned to them and I said, I did something that I never, ever do. I handed out the books, the first thing in the class. Okay. Which of course, you know how loving students are of the big textbooks, right?
Yeah.
And they're like, the groan goes throughout the class, and they're like, what is this? What, you're making us take the books? And yeah, I said, I want you to go through the books, and I want you each to pick. And I think there was like 15 kids in the class or something like that. And I said, I tell you right now, I know you've been through this several years. I'm only going to teach the things you tell me to teach. And they all just look at me. and I had not planned this. It's just what I decided to do that day. And and they're like, what do you mean? I said, each person has to go through the chapter, go through the table of contents, pick out what your favorite topic was. That's it. Your favorite topic in the entire book. And tell me that. I'm going to write it on the board. The only rule is there can't be two things that are the same. No two people can pick the same thing. And those are the only topics I'll teach this year. And the kids are like, this is a trick. And I'm like, no, I'm not. You're lying. No, I'm not lying.
Well, it's a trick in a way.
And like, okay. So I started writing. They said, yep, you first come, first serve. Tell me what you want me to teach. And I wrote them all on the board. And by the end of the year, I taught everything.
And there's 15 chapters and 15 kids, and they can't repeat.
Well, they didn't have to. They picked topics. They didn't have to pick. They didn't have to pick. They could have picked type of rocks, and then they could have picked, lava or magma. Yeah. But what ended up happening was they learned that to understand how sedimentary rocks were created. Oh, I want to learn about this type of rock. Because I'm on the, I'm in Rochester, so we have the whole glacial stuff all around. And to understand what sedimentary rocks are, they had to understand the rock cycle a bit. And so they picked the stuff that they wanted to learn, and therefore they had ownership of what they were being taught. So I tell them, okay, to learn about sedimentary rocks, you want to probably know about this, and this. Is it okay? And by the end of the year, we taught them all. I taught them all, and almost all the kids passed. And I was never so proud of my teaching, because in that class, those kids would have told and did tell everybody that I really wasn't teaching. It was a joke by the time I ended my career that everybody, Gene doesn't teach. That was the thing that people would say all the time. Gene doesn't teach.
Yeah.
So.
Yep. Oh yeah. Yeah. I mean, I think there's still that misconception, even amongst, I think especially amongst parents, you get that a lot. And I've gotten it some in my school. I know in some suburban districts, you get it more where the parents, are demanding homework. I mean, there's a lot of homework now because you're doing it at home anyways, or demanding a textbook, demanding that vocabulary list, and things like that. And if you're not doing that, then you must not be teaching, right. Somehow. And I think it's a misconception amongst the population, not just parents and even kids, where they think and I have kids that will tell me that I'm not teaching them, and then I'll ask them questions, and then they'll be able to answer them, and I'm like, well, I taught you. Like, well, I didn't actually like study or do anything. I'm like, it's because you were in class and you learned it. I'm like, it didn't require you to go, read an entire textbook, and kids think that if they don't have like the vocabulary memorized word for word, that they didn't learn it.
Right.
And kids will actually tell me that. They're like, oh, I didn't memorize all the vocabulary. I'm like, good. Like, right. That's not the expectation. I'm like you said, it's great if you can recite Newton's laws. Okay, that's good, but you have no clue what the heck you memorized it for.
Exactly, and that's one of those things that students, they came to you and said that to you because that is what their previous teachers and their parents told them. Mm-hmm. And so they're just living up to the expectations. And like again, I like Noir's comment here, demanding to know what the grade is, but ignoring what not. But he's not learning X. That grades are.
That's a good topic.
Of education. Yeah.
Oh yeah.
Grades are the downfall of education. I was never so happy in my career that when I finally had my convinced my district to have my NASA class. It was a pass. I made it. I forced the issue. Even went to the board and said, I want this to be a pass-fail class. And they're like, why? And I said, because you don't get a grade in work. You get paid. Grades are not. Who's better than in your position? The school board member with an 88 or the school board member with an 89. That's ridiculous. And so the students. Was really interesting because one year they actually begged to have grades in the class because of their parents.
Yep, that's what I'm saying. It's
So So we did it for a little while, but then they're like, but wait a minute, now I have to do this thing for that number. And they begged us the next year to get rid of it. So we did. And it was so funny because the administration kept going to me, what are you doing this for? I'm letting the students decide how the course should be run. And they're like, you can't do that. And go ahead and tell me I can. I'm doing it. And I was getting results, which was the important thing.
Right. I have no other classes that were taught that way. I know some people in the master teacher program that have done that with those higher level classes, like, cell biology and things like that, where they just found that grades just really hampered the kids' ability to focus on what they need to do versus the micromanaging of each little grade. Right. I think having that just pass fail, especially at that high level, they can look at and plan for that end product, right? If you're like doing a research paper or a project, and you just be like, all right, this is our goal, this is what we need to get to, let's break that down and set it up so we can get there. And it's not about every little tiny thing that is graded along the way. It's more big picture. And I think I did some like seminar type classes at university that were the same way. It was like those 1 credit classes that were just pass fail, but it was all just like reading papers, doing research, and talking with colleagues. It's like you didn't need a 4-point scale GPA to grade whether or not you had a discussion at that level. And I think it's one of those things that it's weird how like the lower the grade level it seems, the more micromanaged it is, whereas the higher you progress through like university to PhD, the less of that specific grade you usually get. It's not like you go to do your dissertation and they're like, well, you got a C+. You know what I mean? It's like either passed or you failed, right?
I want to be the doctor that got a C+ on their their test. It's one of those things that you're like. I wish for years I've been saying it, and I just wish there could be some other way of assessing students other than grades. I've tried rubric. I did it all over the years.
Well, this year I'm not giving tests this year. I'm going to give like small quizzes for like vocab type stuff, some like recall things, because I think that there's, I want you to know what electrons are negatively charged, right? I'll just give you a quiz on that. But I'm going to do portfolios for like that main assessment type grade. That's because I'm like, how am I going to give a fair test when half the kids are at home, half the kids are in school, some were always at home, and never in school. I'm like, whereas a portfolio, they can always show evidence of what they learned. Right. If they learned it, I'm like, show me. If you can't show me, I don't know what to tell you. Right? If you can show me you learned something, then thumbs up, I'll give you a grade.
Yeah.
I mean,
yeah, absolutely.
And I think their ability, because I'm going to have them reflect on it as well. And I did this in a computer class that I taught, computer literacy for a few years. And I had them do portfolios as far as their web page making. They had to make their own web pages with their portfolio. But I'll have kids do it this year, and I have it all kind of planned out. I have rubrics and stuff, and we'll see how it goes. But it'll be weird because, they're going to come in and they're going to be like, what? There's no tests. And they'll be happy about it until they realize how much work goes into a portfolio.
Right.
All that time that they would have not spent studying, they'll have to spend actually developing a portfolio. But I don't know. That's what I came up with. Because I don't see how tests work at all in this situation.
And again, this is one of those opportunities. You're using this as an opportunity to try something different. And this is how it could end up having a major change. You're going to find something that works really well, probably.
Or doesn't.
Maybe a different one. And you'll eventually use that. And you'll also learn what doesn't work.
Oh, yeah.
And that's fine. And I think that's one of the things I had the last few years of in my classroom. classroom, and I kept it up there purposely for all my classes. Was because the big thing when everybody talks about NASA, they quote that that failure is not an option, and failure when you have your astronauts all the way at the moon and can't get back here, then you don't want it to be an option. Yep. But it's in my classroom. I had a sign across the whole classroom, and it was a huge front of the room. It said, "Failure is not only an option; it's mandatory in this class."
Yeah.
And it was just I wanted you to fail and learn from you.
Yep.
No one has ever learned from success.
Yeah. And you know, as far as that quote's concerned, the backstory of how many things they tried on the ground.
Yes.
They failed on the ground so that it would work up there. Right?
Yes.
I mean, like, there was a lot of failure happening. You just couldn't let it happen at the wrong time.
And that led to a whole different thing. That's a perfect example of how that failure changed NASA. Like now NASA, whenever any astronaut goes up, they have a partner down on Earth that does all the things ahead of time. They're going to work on the space shuttle on the exit outside. They go and they do it in the pool here, and they mirror it ahead of time. And you know, that's one of those things that I felt blessed to be able to share with my students, is showing this is, you know, it's okay to fail. Do it now so you don't fail later. That's the biggest thing. And if I will deem myself a success if in teaching, if one student got that out of me in the past.
Right.
That is so important to me.
And it's also those things where the best way to practice for a test is to take tests.
Yep.
Right? I mean,
yep.
Right? Because my thinking always was, and it still kind of is, you don't want to just send a kid into a Regents without ever having seen a Regents question, right? It'll trip you up because your mind is too open, basically, instead of being rigidly thinking Regents logic, you know, which you need to be able to do. But you probably take one practice Regents test before you take it, having done portfolios all year,
and you're fine.
You're probably fine. I think, you know, you take two practice ones, you're golden. I mean, as long as you're looking at it and you're reviewing what you did wrong and things like that, especially. So, and I, you know, this is one of my things, because I've always, when I've taught high school as well, it's like, well, I have to not necessarily teach to the test, but teach with the test in mind. And so it's been your general Regents style class where, you know, everything is focused on passing that test. Whereas now, having especially since the COVID thing, thinking about this is, well, if you just took one practice test, the majority of kids would probably do fine going into that Regents. If you've covered, you know, the content and they've been involved and they've been learning, then okay, without ever having taken a test, you know. I think there's something to be said for test taking skills, but, you know, because I don't see things like the bar exam or, you know, MCAS or something going away. Those are going to be around forever. But
at your level, the kids are not used to them that much yet,
right?
But being teaching physics, these kids are so burned out on multiple choice tests like that. I just wish that they would come up with a different variety, something different, like that would test their skills, especially now with the new all the new standards. You know, we were promised when we were creating those standards that the tests would change. Well, I don't see that. I haven't seen that happening yet.
Well, I've seen a little bit of it. There's more reading.
Yeah, but the reading really started before that, though.
There was a progression. You're right. It's before that, and there's a lot more of. I've seen uses of the term, you know, inferences and using graphs to analyze data and things like that. There's a little bit more of that, but that, it's really hard to make a test that tests what should be an inquiry process.
Yeah.
That's just the bottom line. It's tough to do. And the state's not going to make another hands-on test.
Yeah.
That's not going to happen. So, yes, I don't know what they're going to be doing with the test, to make a change.
Well,
any more than it is.
They can always
do Regents this year. But I mean, the Regents, like, I started grading the funny thing, like my district backstory. 5 years ago, they didn't have physics. Like, we hadn't had physics in like 10 years. The teacher that taught it, like, was teaching it 1 year, not the next year, and then not for 2 years, and then not for 3 years, and then he retired, kind of thing. And they hadn't been teaching it. And then kids were asking me to teach it, so I was like, okay, sure. I took a year of physics in college 20 years ago. Let me do it. And then
I've heard that story so many times in my life.
And pretty much, I taught the kids whatever I learned on Khan Academy, and it was fun because, like, one of the kids came up to me at the end of the year. He's like, "Mr. Biter, it was fun learning physics with you. It was a good experience." I'm like, yeah, because we learned it together. Not that I didn't know it, but I had the skills to be able to do it. So it was fun. But anyways, and then guidance, also realized, they're like, wait, we need a Regents physics because a lot of these programs in colleges kids aren't qualifying for. I'm like,
no because you did physics first, yeah.
I'm like, no shit. I'm like, I told you that. And they're like, oh, okay. So anyway, so we finally got a physics teacher, not me. But now I'm grading the Regents, physics. You can't grade your own test, so I have to grade it because I'm the only person in the school that can grade the Regents physics exam. Lucky me, right?
Oh, lucky you, yes.
The lucky thing is there's only like 10 kids in the class in our school, so that actually take the Regents. So, but those questions are very like plug in a number, spit out an answer. I'm like, you're just like an algorithm, essentially. Yep. And that's where I first saw that, what you're talking about as far as like the new tests. So I was like even the chemistry and the bio ones aren't really that bad. The physics one was very just like, did you use the right formula? Did you plug in your numbers right? Did you solve it? I'm like, this is a math test, not a physics test.
And it's the better version of what it used to be.
I'm like, that's awful.
Yeah, it is. I totally agree with you on that. It's like they sometimes get one or two of the longer answer questions toward the end, decent, done well. But overall, it's a math test that if you honestly just wrote down doing the plug and chug method through a question, you could get most of them. I've never, in all my years of teaching, been happy with the Regents physics. It just never. It did nothing for physics.
Right.
It showed you could do math. That was about it.
Yeah. See, Lantern Noir says half of the bar exam is essay. Right, and that's one of my other options. Was I thought about, besides portfolio, to do just essay questions, but then I was like, then I really have to worry about like accommodations and, still then there's the plagiarism issue because they will copy and paste and cheat. That's just the way 8th graders are, unfortunately. And so I kind of went away from that aspect of it. So well, Moron's being very specific here. Math, yes, derivations and proofs. Okay, we're corrected. Jeez.
Okay. Not getting we need an English teacher in here to correct our language.
Semantics.
No. Says the science. Says say the two science guys. That's no. I get it. You got to use the right terminology.
Yep. Obviously, I'm not a math person per se. I can do some of it, but that's about it.
Yeah. Well, what you were saying about the portfolio, though, is I think is important. And like, and don't forget, you can also include art and drawing and things like that. I'll never forget the day it dawned on me that I had a student that just was always having a difficult time. And when I went to help one day, I just started drawing, and I always did drawings in the board and everything. But when I did it personally and drawing things on their notebook, and with a question, all of a sudden their face lit up and it was like, oh, get it. And it was then I realized it was a visual thing. And from that point on, the two of us would always do drawings to kind of represent things. So much so that it eventually grew to my idea to create a physics of the arts class, which would get more people in the arts, not just visual, but audio and things like that. And it was an incredible thing to be able, again, learn with my students, because I'm a physics guy, but I don't have the huge background in the arts and things like that. So I always told the students that I would teach them, again, whatever they wanted to learn about the science behind their art. And it was pretty incredible learning along with the students. And the students would all of a sudden realize that at some point going, wait a minute, you're learning this along with us. Yep. Yes, I am.
I've done that a lot. Because, I mean, I have my degree is in biology, but I teach, 8th grade physical science. I've also taught computer literacy, earth science lab, physics, and general chemistry, and any number of other, whatever they tell me to. The joys of a small district.
Right. Yep.
But I loved all of it, and as most lovers of learning, like I would teach world history if they asked me to, because I'd be like, yes, this is gonna be so cool.
Absolutely.
I'd be like, part of me would be kind of annoyed, but part of me would just be like, yes, this is gonna be awesome. We're gonna relate it all to science.
and the thing about it is, I never wanted to be that teacher that taught the exact same thing every year. I knew teachers
I'd get bored.
Use the exact same overheads for the last 10 years that I was there.
Oh yeah.
They just pull the exact same packets, rarely changing anything up. And it's like, how can you do that? And they're like, how can you not do it? That was their answer back to it had to be different. I would keep the same demos and things like that, but hell, I wouldn't if I had the same course in like Regents Physics, 4 Regents Physics classes, I wouldn't do the demos the exact same way I did them in class.
I do the demos different every year, especially because like I'll do like dry ice usually, and without fail, I find on YouTube something else really cool to do with it. It's like you watch absolutely. It, and even like the performance aspect of it. I went through a whole period where I was like, I don't want to just do the demo. I want to like perform the demo. Make it like, theatrical almost, in a way, because it was because I could get into it. It'd be fun, and a lot of these kids are familiar with all this stuff already because they watch a lot of the same dirty YouTube videos that I do. But every year I try to watch these demos online and get new ideas of little tweaks or little things that they do differently that you're just kind of like, oh, I never thought of doing it that way. That makes it so much easier or safer or, interesting or, oh, that's right. There's an application to this, with this phenomena as well. So, I think, the internet's been great for demos, and I change them up almost every year that I do demos. It's just so fun.
And the thing about it is, what's even great, like especially days before, having the students find things and submit things as part of a minor credit producing thing. show me a link of a video that you. What's going on here? You know, there's so many fake videos out there of things like the huge super slide and things like that. The magnet, the making popcorns pop with your cell phone. I can't tell you the number of things I used to have my students talk to me about, and I just have them. Okay, bring all these things in on the next Friday, and watch the students again want to be taught why this works or doesn't work.
Yes, it was interesting. I was on a Discord with some other chemists, and I mentioned no, it was on a Twitch chat, and I mentioned that I was like, that elephant toothpaste demo, I can never get it to work like it does on TV, right? I mean, it just shoot straight up. I'm like, I tried every combination of, you know, the chemicals you're supposed to use, different, you know, concentrations, and, you know, and one of the chemists was like, you know, a university professor's like, yeah, I could never get it to work either. You know, it's somehow, you know, they're doing something else, you know, to make it for TV, you know. And I was like, I was kind of relieved. I'm like, okay, it's not just me. I was like, you know, I have that imposter syndrome, you know. I'm like, I'm just like an 8th grade teacher. I'm trying to get this stupid demo to work, and it's cool, you know, it goes, you know, but it's not like, you know, I wanted like the, you know, launch, you know, at the ceiling, you know, kind of thing, you know. And I'm like, and I was like, oh, okay, I feel better about myself now.
Well, that's one of the reasons why I love physics Twitter. It's just because physicists like nothing more than to prove they're superior.
Yep.
And so they will sit there and like, oh, here's why this is wrong, and here's why this is. Yeah. And, you know, it's kind of like telling you somebody that they're using the word maths wrong. But it's one of those things that I love watching that go through Twitter, because these videos show up there all the time.
Mm-hmm. Yep. Oh yeah. Yep. And it that's funny about physicists.
It's one of those things that when I first became a teacher, one of the things, and I, like I said, I have a degree in physics. I was going to be an astrophysicist, and decided a week before I graduated that I wanted to teach instead. And so for the first 10 years of teaching, I'd go to physics conferences. They're the most boring thing. It's like a whole bunch of dogs urinating on everything. It was so like, oh my God, people, you don't have to prove you're better than everybody else. And yet everybody did. That's what they were about. So,
well, I guess that science and tearing down others, yeah, that's what you're supposed to do as well. You know, you're wrong. Mostly they like tearing down each other. That's the thing. Yeah. Yeah. Yep. That's funny. So let's finish up here. It's 11 o'clock. We've been talking for
holy cow, I didn't realize.
Almost 2 hours here, right? Time flies. You know. Next time we'll do a chat where we just talk about beer. We can do that.
I'd love that. Beer or games, whether I love
or a little of both. We can just do a Discord chat
craft
on that.
Is one of my favorite things.
So, are you on Untapped? Do I have you on Untapped?
Oh, I'm on Untapped. Yep.
Okay, I'll touch base with you, and I'll make sure I have you on there.
Yeah,
I'd be surprised if I didn't.
I've actually fallen off quite a bit. I just in the past 6 months for some reason. I don't know why I stopped drinking. Probably should have started drinking more.
I kind of, I kind of started in March for some reason and didn't stop.
The thing about it is, for me, honestly, I love going to the breweries themselves.
Oh, I do too. I like whenever I go somewhere, it's like with my wife now, I'm like, oh, did you know while we're in this area of New York State that there is this craft brewery? Well, it's like we go visit. It kind of gets you to a different part of town and gets you. I like that aspect of it as well.
The next time you're here for Standings, what we got to do is get a group of us. I've been saying this the last 2 years. Within 5 miles of my house is one of the top was it top 10 breweries now on Untapped in the world. It's more, and very few people know about it unless you're really into craft beer, and that's Mortalis.
Okay. Yep.
Have you heard of it?
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah. I'm into craft beers. So, and I've been to Rochester a lot. So, my aunt lives there. My dad's side, that's where their family is from, out there. I visited a few of the craft breweries there when I was last there. I did not go to Genesee. I still want to go there. I guess their restaurant there is really nice.
And they've really upped their game with their craft beers now. They've really tried doing things now. But this has been fun. I've enjoyed it. Hopefully, I didn't turn off too many people.
Oh no. It's been great, and I'll probably have you on again. There's so much we didn't even touch on besides beer. We didn't talk about like Stainus at all. We talked about conferences a little bit, but there's so many other aspects that we can dig into. I love it. We only talked about NASA for a little bit too. So. Oh yeah,
believe me, I could talk for more than 2 hours on things.
And if you have something specific going on, just let me know, and I'll give you a platform. You can chat here all about whatever programming you have going for NASA as well.
Cool. And what I can do is find out what things are out there for teachers beforehand, so I can actually point people to the links and things.
Yep. And I want to send you a link to the Knowledge Fellowship Discord, and you can join there as well, because that's a group of educators interested in streaming and education and science. So
I'd definitely be interested, because I've been actually talking with my daughter about starting something up. So
yeah, definitely. So all right, well, it's been fun.
Well, thank you very much. It definitely has been fun.
All right. For everyone else that's here, we're gonna see if there's anybody to raid. So in Twitch, if you raid, I'll take everyone that's watching right now, and they'll go see someone else that's on. So
what I don't understand rating, because I have not. I watch Twitch only a couple shows. So.
Yeah, so rating, basically, I take everyone that's watching my channel right now to another channel.
Oh, really?
Yep. And then they can do that. So we'll probably go to Decaf Jedi, because they're doing retro, and this looks fun. King's Quest 7 is what the title is.
Oh, so wow.
That's back my PC gaming days. I didn't do a lot of arcades.
That's an old game.
I did a lot of that stuff. So we'll
shoot Larry.
Hey, that's classic right there. These are shoot Larry. So all right. So let's do this. Great channel. This is all done on my side.
Oh, very cool.
Wham!
I really wanted to do more Twitch lately, so just to see what's out there.
Yeah, just be sure to say hi to Decaf Jedi. Say hi. I haven't been to his channel in a while, so they'll probably be like, "Who are you?" What's going on?
There. Hello.
All right. Fun times. Okay. I'll sign off here, and we can say goodbye on